Hey, hello everyone. Welcome back to the series of somatic psychotherapy and non-duality. And once again, my guest and mentor, Scott Kiloby. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, this is our 7th talk. And it's very, I'm grateful. You know, I just reached out not long time ago to have a little interview, and I procrastinated for a year. And then as soon as I reached out, you got back to me in about an hour. So here we are, the 7th one. So let's get straight into it. And as a topic that is very dear to you, and it's started to become dear to me and extremely useful in working with clients. And pretty much unknown, or if it's known, it's known kind of theoretically, and people agree like, yeah, but I don't see, nothing is happening about it so much. So the topic is, let's see how you put it, about repression, and repression having become institutionalized in spirituality, from New Age to non-duality. So repression, and so let's focus on that. And historically, I think some of the grandfathers of psychotherapy, even Freud, and there's all the origins of this, that repressed feelings, repressed emotions from childhood, and then so this even psychoanalysis was focusing on that and trying to go there and to feel it. But I feel like that, it's almost like they're on a shelf and it's important, but at the same time, in all the psychotherapy studies, like formal, and even in like with a master's in psychotherapy, and also doing like great like Hakomi, mindfulness-based psychotherapy, nobody mentioned about that. So can we also maybe discuss a little bit what's the difference between repression and suppression?
Well, if you look it up, it says something like repression happens unconsciously, like an involuntary mechanism. We're not aware of doing it. It just happens as part of how we show up in the world. And suppression seems to be there's some more intentionality around it. And I'm reminded of my husband, because he'll say, when we start talking about repression, he says, I can remember specifically compartmentalizing things. Like he was more conscious. He's like, something happened and I just remember shutting it out. I would say maybe that's closer to suppression, because when he discovered repression, he realized that he didn't see a point at which he consciously made a decision. It just happened as a result of his relationship with his parents, his family of origin. And that, just hearing him say it that way helped me understand it. I don't know about your own experience, but I don't remember intentionally suppressing things. I'm sure that I did, but I don't have that memory that he has, where he says, I know that I compartmentalized. For me, it was just discovering that, unbeknownst to me, I had repressed anger and these other things. And I don't ever remember again, except for the one example when I just shared with you at age 20, when I took ecstasy for the first time, and I knew what the drug was supposed to do. And I remember saying, I'm not going to open up to people. I'm not. So I think that was an example of suppressing that, like, no, consciously aware that I didn't want to, and I didn't have a great trip, and there was a lot of bad things that happened as a result of that. But that's an example, I guess, now that I think of it.
Yeah, I totally, I see it like suppression is that, somehow consciously, and like just basic example, you are in a board meeting at work and some boss pisses you off, and it wouldn't be appropriate and useful and smart to kind of lose it. I remember I was tennis player. I was playing tennis seriously since I was a kid. And it was very clear there. I mean, you lose a point, some people get angry, but we were taught that, hey, you need to focus on the next point And so having too many emotions about it is not going to be helpful. So, you know, it was like a acquired skill, you know, to keep it together, you know, to focus. Also, in men's work, you know, they even talk about this, some quality of a healthy masculine, a warrior archetype, which is not, you know, a soldier or a destroyer, but like a protector, and this kind of archetypal masculine energy that they said to have this ability to contain. Let's say you need to get shit done, or you need to protect somebody or take care of some stuff, and then you have some strong feeling. You're like, hey, there's no time for this now. I will save it for later. I'm going to get shit done. And then later, supposedly, you would kind of go into the lover archetype, they call it, and to feel and emote and stuff like that. But it seems like, so repression is, we are doing it automatically. We don't even know that we are doing it. It's a mechanism of developed first from childhood. And then it might be, as you mentioned, might be strengthened and supported and rewarded in spirituality. Yeah. I remember actually I know this is probably some conscious, at the same time became repressed in my childhood. I heard my father had a lot of, you know, trauma connected with the communist regime and a lot of pain. And also he couldn't talk about it, because if he knew he talks about it or complains about the dictator or the regime, and I'm a little kid, I may speak about it at school. So he couldn't talk about it, and he was kind of nice, but there was this like something smoldering underneath, and sometimes it will just pop, and at the neighbor or somebody, like suddenly like, bah! And I remember that it was very scary for me. And I remember by age 13 or so, I was getting into some beginning of seeking, and I remember that I found a book about hypnosis, and where you can program yourself. And I did that, and I wanted not to be like that. I felt like this is a big weakness to express anger like that and to lose it, and wanted to not be like that. So I had this thing like, I want to control myself. I'm going to control myself. I'm going to control my anger, and I'm going to, and somehow I succeeded. Succeeded. And I remember later having my first girlfriend, and at some point I'll be so angry. I was so angry with her, but I would be like, no. And I'll go and have walks. I would say, hey, I cannot talk right now. I'm angry. I'm going to have long walks. And then, yeah. And later I found some spiritual path which only enforced that. So I was like, oh, great. Oh, I'm already doing this pretty good. That's great. So I'm on the right path, where like the expression of negative emotion was considered an obstacle to awakening, and contributes to identification. And so, yeah. So can you talk a little bit, or how did you discover this actually? How did you discover this, and what are some of these origins of the mechanism of repression? How it might have been formed from your understanding or observation?
Well, now that we talk about suppression real quick, I do remember like intentionally suppressing my homosexuality as a kid. I do remember that now, like having those thoughts and like, no, that's not allowed, or I'm not ready. But the anger repression, I can't pinpoint a time like you where I intentionally suppressed it. It seemed to happen much earlier. As I've gone into inquiry, it felt like it may have started with my mom. Like the thought that I was the cause of her pain because I was an accident, and I don't think they really wanted me. So I think I felt that from my mom. I didn't discover that until later in inquiry. It was really early, like some energetic, because I would go through different people in my experience, like dad wanted me, sister wanted me, brother wanted me, mom didn't want me. And I felt that. So I can see that that must have been could have been before that, because I've actually had past life stuff come up, and I have no idea whether they're past lives, but it showed up as someone who I don't know, a woman, and she's been there for years, and she was really angry at men. And so that she kept popping up more and more as I was doing the repression work. So maybe that's the origin. I don't know if you believe in past lives. I just know that it showed up that way. Whether she was really a person or not, I don't know. But if you want to talk about that as an origin, the feeling as if it started before I was here, I don't know. But it certainly was part of my growing up. So as I can reverse engineer it now, and I can look and more clearly see what happened. But it seemed to start with mom in this life, and then got bullied, and learning that if you express, you get bullied. That was the message. And then not knowing that's the thing, is not knowing that you're repressing anger. That's the thing that's been startling to me. I've been doing it for so long and so often, but yet it's not conscious to me. So when it became conscious, as I shared before, is when it turned into chronic pain, or it was contributed to serious spinal pain. So then I felt like I was essentially forced into it in a way, because like if I wouldn't have done it, I would have continued to suffer physically so bad, and then I was getting relief from it, from doing it. So that's how I first discovered, is through necessity with the chronic pain. But yeah, I think that's really where it became conscious. I don't remember. Like before, it would have been like, I don't know, where's my anger? I don't know. I don't have it. And then here's the thing. Like, let's talk about spirituality, because I don't want to lump all New Age or non-dual teachings into one thing, because I don't think that's fair. But in certain New Age teachings or practices, they'll even go so far as to say, if you're having negative thoughts and feelings, there's something wrong with you, and that you need to only cultivate the positive. So people were coming to me from those traditions, and they were sick, some of them, like just emotionally sick, in some cases physically sick. And then to start inquiry on allowing the negative was very scary to them, because they had been conditioned to think that spirituality means only positive things. So it's like a paradigm shift for them. It was a lot. Now, I don't know what happens in other New Age. I just know that's there somewhere. And then in non-dual teachings, we give lip service to the idea that everything is allowed to be as it is. We say that, but then in subtle ways, you send the message, like you said, that if you get angry, that's an ego response. And even when you said something at the end where you said, getting angry is a block to freedom, something like that. But I would say getting angry is a necessity for some of us to be able to access that anger, to experience that freedom, because of the repression. So there's these little subtle, and maybe not so subtle, messages that we get around ego and what it is, and what anger is, and what it means about you. And then that further solidifies a repression that has been going on forever. And that's a fascinating topic to see. That's what I mean by institutionalized, because it's just like, it reminds me of homophobia or being gay. So you grow up repressing or suppressing your sexuality, and then you get into like priesthood, which is institutionalized, and you get to just hide there. And that, in a way, I think I see that as spirituality. It's like you're already doing it, and then you get into this teaching or tradition that institutionalizes it with its language. And then you don't even know it's happening. It's just like with this, you don't even realize it's happening until you wake up to your own repressed stuff. And then, as you know, that changes you, because you can't unsee something. And so this is what I'm talking about it now, because as I share and do repression work with people, I keep seeing them coming from these different therapies and traditions. And in one way or another, they've been on the receiving end of that institutionalized repression. And so it's just, I don't want to create another concept, but just a way of talking about it. It's not just individuals that are repressing, their entire collective groups of people, social networks, and teaching conceptual frameworks that are reinforcing it. And practices that are reinforcing it.
There is this idea that the science discovered that we have this, Francis talks about it, mirroring neurons, which is like the child basically, or that's why, you know, when you are with someone in the room or even on Zoom and they feel something, if you're a little bit more aware or conscious or clear, you feel what they are feeling. But this is happening in childhood, which allows for the child to mimic and imitate and become to learn from seeing the parent and becoming it. So some kind of osmosis. And so basically, early on, we come as a, you know, this is spirit, or, and the body is clear and open, and, you know, the child doesn't give a shit about, you know, being appropriate or accepted or something. So it's like this, they call it, Don Miguel Ruiz with the 4 agreements, the undomesticated, you're undomesticated. And then all these programs come. I mean, even before the programs come, I'm watching my parent who are already shut down, you know, shut down. There is a lot of unfelt feelings and a lot of things they are trying to hold on and keep going with life. And so this comes in, is no like a download without even before they get a chance to tell us something, let alone when, you know, there starts to be messages. And I just worked with someone yesterday, a wonderful person, very spiritual, very loving, and then, but you were saying that when somebody does something is not okay, she cannot say anything about it. She cannot say anything. So we look there, and then I go beyond the situation, and with, like, you know, her parents, mother and father, and then it came very fast and with very lots of feelings that when she was young, she when she had anger, or when she was loud, or when she was wild, they would say, no, it's not appropriate, this is not appropriate. And then so she learned that, yeah, it was interesting, would come this program, I can feel it and express anger, it's not appropriate, this is not appropriate. and so she had to repress some feelings, and to repress this wild, spontaneous, we talked last time, authentic nature, the zest of life, where we have our future mission. We're like, hey, I'm passionate about this, but if my passion is like squelched, and I have to be appropriate, that, so I could see how, and this is not just this lady, I mean, I see it myself, I see it in so many people. So yeah, so the childhood, I guess with some good intentions, the parents want us to be good, or I guess they pass on their own, messages that they received. So it starts this, we are, I guess we are buying into it because we have no choice. They say the child is like gullible, naive, totally complete, open, programmable. And then we want to be loved and belonging. Yeah, I was asking her, what are you getting from this? Belonging, getting approval, getting, so for also with survival, I mean, it can be survival. You were talking about repressing of sexuality. So you have to appear more male or not too feminine.
Well, can we go back to something that you said? Because the people out there listening who've not done this particular work or really skillful work on repression, maybe all that you have is just the intellectual understanding, like at first, because that's all that I had when I first started reading about it. But the thing I want to say to people is that when you go into inquiry with this work, you actually start to see exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Like when you put yourself in the company of your family of origin in inquiry, where you bring them up in awareness, it's no longer theoretical. You can see that the way that your dad shows up or your mom, that there are programs with it that you believed, and that those programs form how you show up in those relationships. So it stops being theoretical at that point. You can literally see it all. You can see how you've been programmed. So what I wanted to say about that for those people listening, maybe you have some cursory understanding of this, but you haven't taken that deep dive experientially to see it. So, obviously the invitation is to that when you're ready. But until then, just understand what Mihai just said, which is it's even more subtle, as you know, than you said, because yeah, a parent might say that's inappropriate, but the cues are often nonverbal, their body language, facial expression, energy. It's not always words, because I don't ever remember my mom and dad saying, don't get angry. What happened is my mom just never was comfortable with anger, so she was shut down, and I modeled that. And then when my mom and dad argued over issues that people argue, I somehow interpreted that as anger destroys relationships and families, watching that. So I learned somehow, oh, don't do that, because then you're going to lose the people that you love, and then that would mean that you're unlovable or something. So it really wasn't overt in any way. It was just getting these cues and messages. And then lo and behold, you grow up a certain way, not knowing how that happened. And then if you're listening to us now, you may just have the intellectual understanding by going back and thinking about it. Like, okay, I'm in my family of origin. Oh, I can see now that dad did this or that. You can get it to some degree that way, but you really see it in inquiry, and you feel it in inquiry, and you feel the no, the power of the no, I won't. And that's why we're talking about it. It's not that you and I have sat down and had this big intellectual discussion around repression. Well, you and I have been in the work of it. So then we're coming out and talking about it without, for those people who are listening, they haven't done it. We're just inviting them in, but you can still get a sense of it. And I think part of what I'm doing now in the world is just kind of waiting for people to take it from just this concept that's novel or interesting, where they go, oh yeah, but then they don't have any skill or tools to go in that. From there to where the rubber meets the road now, it's one thing just to know that that's probably something there, but it's a whole nother thing then to go look at it and discover it for real in your experience.
Yeah. I mean, we are not going right now in this interview about actually, okay, what to do, but I want to tell the listeners that there's this very sophisticated and surgical set of tools that Scott developed that is kind of really going into what's called core material very fast, into the subconscious programs / pain body, and then also he developed these things that you can actually check, like in a dealership, if what kind of repression I have in my system. And is a wonderful video on YouTube where it's just like, hey, just check, man. Where it's like the litmus test for repression, and you can see for what is it for anger. But what's interesting is not just that, because for me anger was bad or it sounds spiritual, but fear. You can have fear repression, you can have shame repression, you can have joy repression, love, sadness. And I was very surprised when I did it recently, although I've done a huge amount of work, that it all came no. I can't, for some mysterious reason, it was not okay to express any of them, including love and affection, joy, enthusiasm. And I was like, wow, this is yeah.
Humbling, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway,
but in some sense, we're all beginners on the repression work, though.
Yeah.
If we've not had any practices or traditions that really open that up, if we've been doing work for a long time, it shouldn't be a surprise that the repressions are there if we haven't had any access to it. So they were all there for me. I think I said I had repression on all of those at first during the chronic pain, if I remember right. That same thing happened for me. But again, just understanding, of course, that would still be there if I have not had anything to look at it. So it wasn't too frustrating to notice that. It was actually eye-opening. And then when I'm doing it with clients, once they find like one repression, they become interested in that spectrum of other possible repressions. And that's where it gets really juicy for people as they start to open up to that work. But here's the other thing, not everybody represses all those. I'm doing this test with people in different degrees, and it has a lot to do with their parents. I've noticed, like, if their parents were more conscious or more whatever, they tend to have less of that. And then if their parents, so it's not all parents, but it's a lot of it is what kind of parents you have.
Yeah. Actually, they talk in men's work, Mankind Project. They do some powerful 4-day so-called initiations, healthy initiation. And so there's 100 men somewhere with a lot of staff. They create a strong container. And the idea, they were explaining some very basic intro to feelings for men, because there's the program for most men is that it's not okay to be afraid, don't be a pussy. It's not okay to cry. Yeah, I'll give you something to cry about. Yeah. It's shame anyway. It's kind of, you want to kind of, you are not like, oh, I'm so ashamed about this. No, it's already, we want to hide it. And sadness, it's okay, not okay, and so the only thing with men is that it's not that they say it's okay to be angry, but somehow usually men kind of snap at some point, and they kind of get angry and destructive. And actually what they were calling in that modality, there was like that, hey, anger is more like the top of there's some cork on a bottle, pressurized bottle. And sometimes when we do the deep visceral, psychodrama, killing things symbolically or stuff, first there will be a lot of anger, and which usually is never allowed. But then when that anger will spend itself, they will beat and yell or cry or no, like that. There will be a moment of silence, and then almost all the time people will just bawl, just cry, because there was something underneath that was not allowed. In my case, that was not allowed either. I mean, so. Oh yeah, and for women, another program is that now it's more like equality, let's say. But for millennia, it's not okay for a woman to be angry, to complain, to express.
Right.
She needs to be
called the B word sometimes.
Yeah, right. Or Freud now called it hysterical, and so it was for survival. Generations and many hundreds of generations of women needed to be pleasant and subservient, and so this is deeply infused in it. I think that's why we are not aware of it, because it's like inbred. And even discovered, I think, that with rats, that the trauma that the grandfather rat experienced is passed on in sperm cells and goes 3 generations. So some grandson rat, although never experienced that kind of toxic gas, but when it goes there, they are kind of like, they know somehow we get this information. Yeah.
That's a good point, that it's more than just the personal. It seems to be, it's personal, it's familial, it's collective, it is, it's intergenerational.
Yeah.
It's institutionalized in these different ways. That's what we're pointing to, is that if you don't see it happening in the big picture like this, you can just get lost in it, because everybody's doing it. Like,
yes.
Not just people individually, but institutions are solidifying it, families are solidifying it, passing it down. So that's probably one reason that I talk about it so much, because there's just not a lot of talk out there. So I'll probably keep talking about it, because until you wake up to it, not non-dual awakening, just woke. You get woke, as they say, to the fact how big this is and how it's affecting us in so many levels.
Keep talking about it. You know what makes me think what you are saying here is not some personal little pockets of. I saw this movie recently on Netflix. It was like a war movie based on a real story, and there was just, I could see there was so traumatic what was happening there. And there was so much happening, and and I'm sure it's not just actors there, but all this, and they were all like, okay, somebody would blow up, and like, okay, they will go, and then they're all kind of like this, and then they won, and now we are liberated from the Nazis, and now these people are going back home, and so these are our grandfathers that had all this trauma, and then pass it on to the So, and also to be able to talk about trauma and to process trauma, this is a luxury that we have, that you can't even think about this if the tiger is attacking you, or if the Taliban is coming, or, so it needs to be relatively safe conditions to be able to go there. And for millennia, the trauma was happening as a survival mechanism. And so part of that, as you say, trauma implies repression. So, hey, this is too much. Basically, this is way too much. And in order to keep going, I need to shut down, check out. And then soon after that, I forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so my point was that I think even Gabor Mate, or this idea that this trauma is not individual, it's like a wave of trauma, and humanity goes through it. So it's like, and I think the same thing is with repression.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a wave of repression, you know, that everybody has to some degree.
It just reminds me that, you know, yeah, you can forget about trauma and repression, but it won't forget about you. And so I think about all those folks who were under a communist regime or in the Holocaust. It's one thing if they're lucky enough to begin healing from the trauma, but then how often do those people get to then go back to the repression? Because that's how they survived. I can imagine,
Yeah,
I can only imagine being, for example, in a concentration camp, what you would have to repress in order to survive that experience. And then you come out of that, like, who's talking about it? Like, where is it talked about? And where are the practices to help those people, not just
yeah,
those people? But that just brought that to mind when you
yeah,
said that, like groups, collective groups of people, collective trauma and repressions there, and how little help they may have with that. I mean, I would hope that they do, but my sense is, having worked with people from
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's not very accessible, this kind of work, to help people like that.
yeah. I think this trauma is more known. They also, I don't know, you know, Thomas Hubel talks about collective trauma healing and all that. But I think with the repression is like, oh, it was trauma 40 years ago. Really unknown in a helpful, useful way. Yeah, I kind of had an idea. Yeah, I lost it. It's all very bubbly talking with you all the time.
Well, I mean, you can imagine how could you not be angry at a situation like that? Is what, if you come out of a situation like that, how can you not be angry?
Yeah,
But how often are people invited to experience and express that? You know,
yeah,
you don't hear about it a lot, actually. You might hear about people with trauma, healing trauma, but you don't, like we're saying, you don't hear people talking about, well, after I did that, or when I did that, I finally came to terms with my rage towards, you
mm-hmm,
know, the German regime or whatever it is. You just don't hear
mm-hmm.
about it. And I think that's the reason that we're talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I once, after my father passed, it was suddenly, and so then I did a psychedelic journey, and my intention was somehow to connect with him. And I remember that I was like, okay, Dad, okay, I'm here. Come on, yes. Nothing, nothing. And then after some time, was with some mushroom, yeah, strong mushroom dose. After some time, and I had a guide there. It's a whole modality where I'm not going to go into it now. But after some time, I started to feel some feelings, which were very, it's like not mine. I was like, whoa, this, and then even I had memories, they were not mine. And I started to have this like, and I was like, well, what is this? And then it dawned on me that it dawned on me that my father kind of froze all of his emotional body. And yeah, think about it, it's kind of sad and love, and
Yeah.
and he passed it on to me somehow, and I also froze it. And somehow I wanted to help him out, or I wanted to connect with him, and somehow I don't know what happened, but I was started to feel his feelings and even his memories, and it was very powerful, and somehow I could allow them. I could feel them and allow them, and it's also distinct that they were not mine, because mine were a little different. And yeah, some passed on of these unresolved issues, patterns. We get all this together with all their strengths. That's important. We don't just get all the shit from the ancestors. We get all their strengths and power, and yeah.
I think that could be helpful. That's kind of an offshoot of this. Is in my natural rest book, I talk about perspective taking, where if you can sit and listen to someone from awareness and as best you can see what they see and feel what they feel as best you can, like, and so that's something to just do in relationship period. But what can also be helpful as this stuff arises, like when the past life figure, her name was Mary, when she came up, there were several times when I just inquired if she was coming up, but then I took her, I was like really taking her view of things to see what is she suffering over, like just kind of imagining that I'm her or taking that on, and then I could see her anger towards men more
Yeah,
directly. So that's kind of an advanced form of inquiry, but yeah, it's I don't know what to say about that other than that could be very helpful if you can just take someone's perspective and feel and see what they feel. You have a better understanding of where they're coming from and why they show up the way that they show up. But that's not always easy to do, as you know, like with someone that you're especially very close to, where especially if
yeah,
you're triggered by, to take their perspective or see it from them, but their point of view. But that's
yeah,
what I see that you were doing, is seeing it from his.
yeah. It wasn't like, oh, daddy, let's. No, it was like that's how we connect. Uh, yeah, but we keep talking about anger, but um, I could see I rediscovered relatively recently of having this automatic, awesome ability to not feel grief and
Mm,
loss. And so, and this played out. I remember I would have relationships as a young man, and then somehow it was over, and I would feel nothing. And I was like, oh, great, nice. I like that. It's maybe because I'm doing this self-remembering or presence. Great, because they talk about you'll become imperturbable and unaffected by circumstances. And I'm like, yeah, okay, nice. And not feel anything, no feel loss, no feel, or I would just feel a little bit of sensations like a burning. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I get busy, I get this, and I get seeking some other date, and then oh, I'm good. So this played on for 25 years or so, so repression of grief, of loss, yeah, a bunch of unfelt things. The side effect of it, I didn't have chronic pain and all that, but the side effect of unfelt things is that you can't be at peace. You can't sit still. You can't feel content in the now. And then they surely need to seek something. And yeah, I was seeking, first of all, spirituality, fanatical addiction, and then other stuff, substances and things like that.
which reminds me, I'm kind of just going off on the subject here, but for those people who are coming from the non-dual perspective and they're listening to us, is I've heard from that camp of people questions like, do you have to be abiding as awareness to do the repression work? And I'm thinking, no, you don't, because in fact, what you're saying is the body is contracted. Even if you don't have chronic pain or illness, like science is telling us that can end that way. Repression can
Yeah,
be in that way, but many people are not experiencing that. But what they are experiencing is kind of what you're saying, is the body is, you're not comfortable in your own skin somatically.
yeah,
So you don't even know what it's like to have a translucent body, because it's not your experience yet. So you don't, so it's like you just sort of accept it. This is just the way a human body feels, not
yeah,
recognizing that there's repression there and trauma that's creating density in the body. And then that's making it hard. If you're interested in non-duality, it can make it difficult to abide, because that's doing something in your life. Well, if nothing else, even if it's not coming up as a trigger, it's an uncomfortable sensation that brings your attention to it quite often. And so here's what I want to say to people coming from non-duality. When you do this work, going deep into the body, that's the embodiment piece. And it then becomes more natural to abide in awareness. And if people don't hear that, they might think, oh, we're just doing processing here. And that's not non-duality, it has nothing to do, but it really does, because people are coming to me from the hordes. Really, I mean, not tons of people, but the ones that are coming are saying those things. They're saying, I was sitting on the meditation mat for years, or I sat in the satsang, and there was something going on with my body, and it wasn't getting met. So there's
yeah,
your example right there of why it's totally pertinent to non-duality, but it's much broader than that, because
Yes.
it's affecting people everywhere in different ways.
Yes.
Oh, can I say one more thing real
yes.
quick before we get off anger repression? I love the fact that you brought up grief and other things, and let's talk about that. But for those who are repressing anger, the thing is how clever and cunning it is, in the sense that you don't even see it. 2 times this week, I was with people who explained to me that someone said something to them, like a mother said something to a friend of mine. And as my friend was talking to me, he was pissed. I mean, he was like, this is what I want to tell her. This is what I want to tell her. And I said, well, what did you tell her? And he said, oh, I think I said, can we talk about this? I said, okay. And then he's like, then he's focusing on, what's my trigger? What am I believing here? What's the identity? And I said, you can focus on that, because non-duality talks about that. But there's another aspect of it, is that there's a repression going on, and can't you see it? And it's so hard to see in that moment, because it's your operating system. So it's how you've always responded to people like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't know any other way, you might not even recognize that it's repression, that you're shutting down in that moment. And I have another friend who has family members who are asking him to do things, and he feels obligated. He doesn't want to do it, but he wants to keep the peace and get love. So he'll be on the phone smiling, like, oh yeah, I'd love to go give such and such a ride. And then he hangs up the phone. He's like, oh, I fucking hate that. I fucking hate that. And I'm like, he says, well, then I'm just going to ignore them for 5 days. So we do that kind of thing, silently punishing in quietness, sometimes when they're shut down. And he asked me, well, do you see another way? And I said, maybe speaking up. And then he said something like, well, it won't do any good. But what I thought was, because you feel like you can't speak up. So then I was pointing him to the work. He does it, but he hasn't really done this yet. So for the people that are, just since we were on anger repression, again, because it's so clever and cunning and you don't see it, you could see those things though. And if you start to see those things, those are ways into seeing it.
Yeah.
The thing about grief, when I'm working with people who've had loved ones who die, when my mother died, I was just grieving in real time in the funeral, and everyone around me was seemed like they were trying to be strong.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the whole thing. Like, and people were looking at me, this is how our culture is. People were looking at me like, I'm sorry that you're taking this so bad, as if there was something that I was doing that was wrong. And I thought, I'm sorry that you're repressing it, like, because this feels healthy. And so then when people come to me who haven't made contact with that grief, that's the thing, is to make contact with it and to feel it and bring it up, because then you can move through it and you don't have to hold on to it. That's another thing, is just holding on to grief. Even if it doesn't create chronic pain, it affects your life. For sure. Unprocessed grief.
This brings me that and we can go back to anger too, because it's still, when I left Romania, I was a young man, moved to another country. My father took me to the airport, and then and he had a little tear, small tear. He goes, because I was leaving, and I remember that made me very uncomfortable. And I was like, no. So to see my father with a tear, and so it was interesting, but it stayed with me. It's like I was shocked. I never seen, Okay, coming back to anger, actually, I remember that in this fourth way teaching, which is ancient, they were saying, this was a paragraph in a book that said, non-expression of negative emotion is not repressing it. Repression is actually very harmful. They were saying that it is actually to allow the energy of the feeling, to allow it and to witness it. And then if you witness it enough, somehow this energy is transmuted into more presence. But, in a book, the master died 40 years ago. So, that's how it became like that. So, and, I came to you to work on some stuff that they were not touched very much by non-duality, So I felt a good level of understanding, experiential understanding about the self, and aware background, and also because of this Ramana, who am I, and a lot of genuine, sincere focus on this. my mind was also pretty clear, which was, wow, that's cool. But the patterns, issues, stuff. So I come to you for that. And then you are, I don't know how we started to do this anger repression. And I was like, well, that's weird. I mean, sure, why not? But I mean, I'm not interested in this necessarily. I think I'm good. But it was very interesting how when we did this, no, I said, I could express towards my dad and or towards my mom, and they would be like, no, for multiple reasons. But at the same time, there will be a lot of the contractions in my chest, in my gut, in my this, in my that, even before having session with you, just the day of the session, during session, after session, all of these things. And we kept persisting. I will get this, no, we can't do it. We can't. And at some point, it came like a yes. And then you tell me, okay, do it. And somehow it happened twice, both with my mom and my dad, looking back, when there was some expression of a voice and expressing upsetness and also like hatred and saying terrible things, like terrible things. I was like, whoa, this is very un-Buddhist of you, man. I mean, but there was something felt so right about it. And what I noticed is that afterwards, when I will do this, I could feel and express anger. I'll be like, yes. And then what I noticed is that I will be with my girlfriend, I will be like this, and I'll be like, I don't like that. Stop that. I don't like that. Hey, I'm pissed about that. And she was like, whoa, she liked that. And I liked it. It was like much more, I think you say it often, if we repress one, or if you repress one feeling, actually you're repressing all the emotional body. You can't repress sadness and anger and have joy. It doesn't work like that. So that's why we end up kind of flat, like, oh, and nothing is good enough. And it's like, that's why we need the big stimulation, big drugs, big something.
Yes. So let me go back to something that you said about, do we need to be able to express the anger? I think you hinted at that, like, as we're doing inquiry, is it necessary to be able to express it, or is it just a matter of feeling it, seeing through it? That I'm weary of anyone saying something like, be careful with this practice, if they're coming from repression. See, so if a teacher or a facilitator says anything that, if they're repressed themselves, then they're going to speak from that. And so what I needed to do was I needed to go all out with this, because for me, when I felt anger, it meant that I couldn't speak. It's like the feeling itself, or the potential for it to rise, meant stay quiet. So the feeling of anger was in some way synonymous with the expression of my voice somehow. So I couldn't bifurcate those very well. If I would have just said I could feel anger, there was still this thing that anger would come up, then because it couldn't be expressed even in a clean way, or even in, like, just like you say, stop it, then somehow the anger just stayed there, and I'm still in it, and I'm still identified with it. But being able to express it, doing that inquiry, being able to express it, somehow that would release the valve off that. The being able to express it. And then, like you say, so if you listen to me and Chester, if you just as a mouse or fly on the wall, it's not unusual for us to be just in the kitchen. He'll just say, stop that. And I'll say, don't do that anymore. Or I don't like it when you do that. And it's very liberating and very actually healthy, because there's no sort of silent kind of resentment, like, so everything is just said. And that's the reason that we're able to get along so well. I mean, we have our issues for sure, but this expression thing is what I'm talking about. So if someone says to me, like, okay, let's do this inquiry, but I'm going to guide you through this inquiry, but we're going to make sure that the anger will never come out in any unclean way, that'll always be clean. It's like, you're trying to tame a wild beast. First of all, you're trying to tame a wild beast. And in any event, if you're coming from repression, then the blind can't lead the blind here. Like, we've got to have some sense of clarity on your side to be able to pull me over the threshold of these repressions. So I do get, on one hand, the wisdom of not puking anger on people I get that.
Yeah.
And if you can do inquiry where you can process it and see through it. But again, for me, expression was tied to anger. It's like I couldn't
Yes.
pull them apart.
Yes. And I was doing this work with you and afterwards on myself. At some point, I separated them, feeling from expression. I would check if I could feel this. And it was interesting. I could feel it.
Yeah.
I could feel it as a child. I could feel it, but expression, no. And so, yeah. And which is the expression of voice, expression of yeah. And also this idea that anger, although it seems like bad, it's culturally or programmed as bad and destructive and hurtful, and it is when it is unregulated, coming from like burning the village, you know, like that. But at the same time, there's a function, you know, God, the creator, created all these feelings for a reason, you know. And so with the anger is that the use of anger is like you have a dashboard, a plane, and or a spaceship, and anger comes, which is saying, hey, boundaries are crossed, this is not okay, you know. And we need to have this, and to put boundaries, you know, to say no, to and I have also a bunch of many clients how they are like good boy and not saying no. And oh, can you take me to the airport? Oh, can you do this? Can yeah, Graham, yeah. And then they are having resentment, their anger, and then resentment towards them, resentment towards oneself. And so this surely leads to all kind of diseases and stuff. But my point was that in case people watching us, they're saying, whoa, this is edgy, man. So now we are going to be like this. Oh, fuck you. Or like, hey, don't do that. And like, no, this may be a phase, may you know, ooze out a little bit, but also you can do it in an intentional container. Some of this pressurized thing will depressurize. But the end result is not that we are now angry, kind of angry, non-dual kind of, no, it's going to be able to say no. When there's a no, there's a no. There's a yes, there's a yes. You know, so it's going to be like a reclaiming of the natural, you know, the natural, what we came here with. And if we want to do any good thing in the world or change the world or anything, we need to have all our equipment here functioning, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that. But the one thing is, just because we're speaking about anger repression, I think it's the same way with anything. It's like I might feel joy or I might feel a desire to express love, but then I get stopped in the expression of it. So that's just so we're not focusing just on anger. I feel like that's the same with most things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's there, but we can't express it.
You know, we can actually go into other emotions other time. I don't mind to staying some more. And I know you have, maybe we have 3 minutes.
7 minutes, but yeah.
7 minutes. Oh yeah. I want to say about this, in some new age and even law of attraction, probably familiar with law, I'm sure you are, law of attraction and all of this, saying that, hey, you know, if you have negative feelings, you are going to manifest negative stuff. So be careful. So be grateful. And I'm grateful. And if I have a feeling like, oh no, I'm grateful for this. And so, you know, there's a truth in that. Because if I'm walking around the day negatively charged, oozing, kind of like, this bullshit is not going to work, it's very likely I'm going to attract more shit. Yeah, so there's truth in that. But the dangerous side effect of this work is like people have already all of this repression and trauma, and it's trying to come out, and then no, because I'm going to manifest bad things, and I'm going to now put, you know, somebody say, put a smiley face on an empty tank. It's fake, and actually it's going to get you sick. I mean,
I've seen
you know, and it's not going to also manifest great wealth and abundance, I think, you know.
Yeah, especially with people who are really sick already. I'm working with people with serious chronic pain and illness, and so there's a lot of buried rage. And so if they aren't able to start expressing it in some way, even if it's cleanly, you can see that the pain can go away, but then they start becoming depressed, you know, or something, some frozen state or something. So there's something about expressing I want to get back to around that, because that keeps coming up in our ranks as facilitators, like how important it is to express. I don't know exactly what I say about it, but it just feels like we need to have the capacity to express it, whether we express it or not. So here's what I want to say. Like when Eckhart says, you know, let anger arise, see that it's not you, rest in the now and all that stuff. You know, there's an assumption there that some of us can even have it arise. Like that's the thing. And so I think when people who are repressing, when they think about it, they'll think, okay, if I start to express it, then I'm just going to become a homicidal maniac or something. I'm going to be identified with it. But if you're already in processing, you're not going to become identified with it. You're just letting it arise so you can then see it for what it is. You're not going to be riding the wave of anger forever. If you've got good practice, you're going to see the stories that come with that too. Anger comes with stories. But if it's all repressed, you don't even get to see it. The point is once it comes out. So I've had to, like, here, I'll just say this. If you imagine a world or a liberated life in which you, if I say in a liberated life, you could feel that you could express joy, you probably say, yeah. And with a liberated life, you could express love and affection. Yeah, positive things. You could express your shame. You could express your fear. But even people will say, well, that would actually be liberating if I could express fear. But then when you say you could express anger, that's when that's where you see the institutionalized thing around that. Like that's somewhat around fear and shame too. But just ask yourself this as you're listening to us. Click off this and say, in a liberated life, would that be okay? And you can see that anger has this special status.
I think I'll put in this link the litmus test video that you have. And very briefly, I remember that with Francis Lucille, I don't know, whatever work he done, I feel he's pretty embodied. He's not repressing. So I was playing tennis with him. He likes tennis, and I was playing tennis, and he will be like, ah! He will shout. I will be like, oh, and then he will smile. I was like, okay. And so, it's interesting. There's a full range. We can full range, allowing, and not being consumed by it. I think actually we are much more consumed by anger by repressing it. Actually, interesting.
Yes, I think so. Something about that emotion makes it feel that way. So that's interesting that Francis does that, because if the thing in non-duality is we're always talking about, the arising of this is just ego. So that's where the institutional thing comes in. Is some of the teachers would just say, hey, when I'm playing tennis, I can yell and scream. So I, just adding a little bit of that. Maybe he does it already.
He was also speaking about this thing, like this emotion called outrage. I think this was from his teacher, Jean Klein, that outrage is actually like a divine emotion, which we need to have. Let's say when you see somebody hurting a child or a dog or a woman or something, and you're outraged. And this is like, because this is against it's totally unloving and hurtful. So we need this in order to say, hey, stop it, back away, motherfucker. So we need that, so he speaks about outrage as a necessary emotion.
That also speaks to the flatness, because if in non-dual teachings or any other teachings, you're told that expression or that outrage is wrong, then we become flat, because then we're a pushover, we're a doormat, anything can happen. And that's the thing in non-duality, it's part of the institutional thing. It's like, everything is okay. Everything is okay. Well, where's the outrage for things that are not okay when your puppy's being kicked? Like, where is that? Or where's the outrage when your mother is being abused by someone? So that's the thing, is like, if you keep being told that all anger is unclean, for example, then you'll think of it that way. All anger is unclean. Anyway,
All right. Now you need to go. We have this training coming up soon. We keep speaking about it, and so let's continue with this topic, Scott. I think there's much more we can go in the other feelings, and all right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.